Donna Meaghar. Donna was a vibrant, well-liked 34-year-old mother who disappeared from her home in Helena, Montana on January 11, 1994. The young mother enjoyed taking her kids to rodeos, riding horses together, and was considered by all to be a great mother. She was well-liked in the community. Working 2 jobs, she did all that she could to provide a good life for her children. On January 11, 1994, Donna was at one of her jobs, closing up at her brother's bar, the Jackson Creek Saloon in Montana City. No one really knows exactly what happened after 9 p.m. that night. They just knew that Donna didn't come home. Within a few hours, Donna's body was found bludgeoned near Colorado Gulch Road, west of Helena. Medical examiners said she died from 10 to 12 blows to the head, likely from a crowbar. Investigators found blood and blood spatter on the road, in the snow, on a light rope, and on the roadway. Freddie Joe Lawrence, his father-in-law, who had a history of mental illness, would come forward to police and report that Freddie admitted to killing Donna. His father-in-law would financially be compensated with reward money for his statement in coming forward. Police would pull Freddie in for questioning, and despite him requesting a lawyer, the police would continue questioning him. The questioning would go on non-stop until Freddie admitted to killing Donna. He would also go on to implicate a developmentally delayed man in the crime. This man's name was Paul Jenkins. The following day, Freddie would recant his confession. Serious allegations would eventually be made against the investigators, offering details to and coerced statements from the mentally disabled man, who had an IQ of about 50, as well as his wife Mary. Mary Jenkins suffered from dementia, and the recording shows that the police selectively recorded only parts of her statements. They frequently started and stopped the recording of the investigation. It would later be alleged that some of this had to do with the fact it was an election year. Despite the fact that the man incorrectly described the murder weapon in the coerced statement, police would later go on to arrest Freddie for murder, choosing instead to rely on the allegation from Lawrence's father-in-law that Lawrence had confessed to the killing. Even in the confession to the father-in-law, the wrong murder weapon was discussed. The father-in-law, in addition, had been diagnosed with a mental illness and had previously provided police with false leads in the past. In 1999, a man named Fred Nelson approached the police to inform them that his uncle, David Nelson, had bragged that he had killed a casino worker with a hammer and that 2 men were serving time for his crime. When nothing was done, Fred once again approached the police, but still nothing happened. Jefferson County, instead, it would later turn out that the police at the time of the murder also declined to follow up on a report that a local woman was spending a large amount of $5 bills in town, despite the fact that the bar was just robbed at the time of a stack of $5 bills stamped with red stars at Helena department stores. The Montana Innocence Project filed a motion in 2015 for DNA testing of physical evidence from the crime scene. DNA evidence on rope found at the crime scene matched David Wayne Nelson, who is serving life in prison for an unrelated murder. This would be the same David Nelson whose nephew had come forward 15 years before to say he'd admitted to the killing. It was in 2016 that the DNA test on the rope used in the murder was finally tested. The DNA on the rope contained Meagher's blood as well as Nelson's DNA. Another unknown man's DNA was also found on Meagher's body, but no DNA from Lawrence or Jenkins was found at the crime scene. After 23 years of prison time, the conviction of Freddie Joe Lawrence and Paul Jenkins was vacated, and the men were freed. A judge concluded that the DNA evidence, in addition to Fred Nelson's report to the police that the wrong man was behind bars. In her decision, the judge wrote, "The new DNA evidence is generally inconsistent with the state's theory that the cases presented at trial for the robbery, kidnapping, and homicide of Donna Meaghar." Not long after their release, Lawrence and Jenkins each filed lawsuits in U.S. District Court in Missoula, Montana, against the county attorneys and law officers who investigated the case. Jenkins' children, Kenneth Jenkins and Crystal Combs, were also plaintiffs in his lawsuit. Meagher's family is adamant that Jenkins and Lawrence are guilty.
Despite a single sample of DNA evidence that places another suspect at the scene of Donna's death, her family says there is more evidence that places Lawrence and Jenkins at the Jackson Creek Saloon the night Donna was kidnapped and beaten to death.
Lawrence and Jenkins actually both wore gloves. We have several witnesses that actually went past the Jackson Creek on the night of the homicide and placed Lawrence and Jenkins' vehicles out front in the early the morning hours.
The evidence is there. I mean, I don't know how, just because of a little bit of DNA and a law that was put into place, lets them walk the streets.
After more than 20 years, Lawrence and Jenkins are free, but Donna Meaghar's family is still in prison, held there by pain and loss.
While the DNA evidence convinced a district judge to overturn both guilty verdicts in the case, Meaghar's family says the rest of the evidence in the case still points to the two men who are now free. Donna's family also insists that Donna was strong and that it would have taken two men to overpower her, which rules out David Nelson. The pain still runs deep. Donna's husband still mourns her to this day, and even her grandkids are scarred from the experience. They are afraid something will happen to their own mom, that someone will take her away. The lawsuit filed on behalf of the two men worked its way through the courts. The suit claims that the police fabricated evidence, hid exculpatory evidence, and otherwise engaged in misconduct to convict two innocent men. The police are accused of using leading questions, coercion, and direct suggestions to falsify and fabricate statements from the two men. They turn the recorder on and off frequently during these interviews with the men, as well as with witnesses, falsely creating the appearance that witnesses were volunteering information that implicated both Lawrence and Jenkins in the murder, when that was not the truth. Officers eventually took a picture of David Nelson's vehicle, which they say matches the description of a car seen outside the Jackson Creek Saloon on the night Meagher was kidnapped, as well as the car seen where her body was found west of Helena. Meagher's family is still not convinced and want Jenkins and Lawrence retried. Investigators have tried to find a link between David Nelson and the previously incarcerated Jenkins and Lawrence, and they have been unable to do that. Lawrence and Jenkins were eventually awarded nearly $12 million between them. It does not appear that David Wayne Nelson faced murder charges, nor were Jenkins and Lawrence retried. Sadly, the biggest loser in all of this is Donna Meaghar, with the true murderer not facing any consequences for her death. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button. Take care of yourself and stay safe out there.